I'm Doug Berger, Managing Director at Headwaters SC. This is a keynote I gave to middle market CEOs on the growth challenge and how innovating can close your growth gap. I'm going to operate like I'm the growth doctor today. Doctor, I'm having growth pains. Well, tell me about your growth pains, okay? Where does it hurt? The market's changing. Growth has plateaued. I'm having trouble raising financing. These are the kinds of things that I hear all the time talking to senior executives about what their challenges are in the area of growth. We're going to talk about line of sight. What do you do? And I want to talk about not just improving growth, I want to talk about stepping it up. I want to talk about putting growth on a new trajectory. And I'm going to use the word innovating, not innovation. When we talk innovation, almost everybody starts to immediately think products or services. What's my offering innovation? I want to use innovating, a verb. Innovating like new thinking, innovating like new courses of action, new behaviors. And I want to be very clear, innovating is about turning ideas into money. So that's the line of sight. And we want to talk about what are your growth goals. And so starting off this process is you have formal growth goals. These are the growth goals that you tell people about. These are the growth goals that you do your strategic planning around, that you do your annual planning around. And they're public. Everyone understands these are the formal goals. And then there are your aspirational goals. And almost every executive that I talk to has aspirational goals that really are a reach beyond what their formal growth goals are. And I want you to keep in mind just not only the formal goal, but the goals that really light you up and turn you on, the goals that what you really want your company to become. There are two different growth strategies. There's a productivity strategy and there's an entrepreneurial strategy. The productivity strategy, the aim of it is out-competing. So who's your marketplace? Who are your competition today? I want to close more business. I want to be more profitable. I want to out-compete. That's the productivity strategy. And the measure of productivity strategy is increasing my market share and increasing my profitability. That's productivity. That's one way to grow. There's another strategy that I'll call the entrepreneurial strategy, and that's about new revenue streams. And that's the aim of an entrepreneurial strategy is new revenue streams. At some point, they migrate over, and once you're established in the new revenue streams, and now you want to be productivity oriented, but in the early stages, we're talking about new revenue streams, and the measure there is, am I acquiring new customers? Am I solving problems for existing customers in new revenue stream ways than I have previously? And that term CPS, or customer problem solution, if you've been reading about the lean startup kind of thing, that's a term that's gotten widely popularized as part of the lean startup, is customer problem solution. If you're talking to venture capital people, you're supposed to have a slide in there that says, these are my customers, these are the problems I'm going to solve, and this is the way I'm going to go about solving it and making some money out of it. So two growth strategies. So that's the first step, if you will, is getting clear about your formal goals, your aspirational goals. What's your nature? So some people are oriented naturally around a productivity strategy for growth. Some people are oriented much more about an entrepreneurial strategy for growth. And so there's a certain introspection that's required. It's not only what the business needs, it's what you as a business person are really oriented around. So now there's the growth gap. And the growth gap is that delta between your growth goals and your current trajectory. Let's say I'm growing at 10% a year. My growth goal might be I want to grow at 20% a year. There's my 10% growth gap. So when we look at that, we've got a historic percent of where my growth has come from. And these are some ways that the CFO might bucket where growth has come from. Additional customers, geographic expansion, product extensions, improving customer service, and meeting some new customer needs. And I've gotten certain percents there. And then when I look at that from a historic point of view, and then I look at that from a future point of view, to close the growth gap, you're almost inevitably going to change the mix of where growth comes from, so that the percents that have historically driven your organization are no longer the percents that are going to drive it to close the growth gap. Of coming to grips with what really is going to be different around here if I want to achieve my growth goals. Then you need to do it with a certain amount of granularity. Now, looking at the growth gap, again with more granularity, we really want to understand from the perspective of my growth strategy. So if I'm going to do a productivity strategy, I'm going to look at the market in a different way than if I'm going to do an entrepreneurial strategy. If I'm looking at the market dynamics for productivity strategy, I'm going to be looking at my direct competition. If I'm looking for an entrepreneurial strategy and new revenue streams, I'm going to be looking far afield of my existing competition to understand what the market's doing. So I'm going to have a very, very different assessment view based on which kind of strategy I do. And a mistake is people go and do these assessments independent of their strategy. We want to start by being clear about the strategy, then look at the market dynamics, then look at competitive performance, and look at our competitive valuation. How would an investment banker value my company versus value some of my competitive companies? Even if I am privately held, I still can get that kind of outside-in view of my valuation. And it's very informative to have that outside-in view. Then we want to look at our capabilities. In light of a productivity strategy or an entrepreneurial strategy, what capabilities do we have? What constraints are we under? So we have regulatory constraints, those are obvious. We also have financial constraints. We may have requirements of debt that we have to pay back to the bank. We may have dividends that we have to issue to shareholders who've invested in us. So we're under financial constraints. We're under other kinds of constraints as well. And then the last thing is we want to understand consequences. So let's say I'm on a 10% trajectory. Great. Let's use that as a baseline. What are the consequences if I only grow half of that? What are the business consequences if I grow double that number? And they're not always just good news consequences. You know, I wind up with big growth. I wind up with different problems. I have the staffing problems, the training problems, the financing problems. I have lots of other problems that are consequential to stepping up growth. And so we want to go in knowledgeable about what the consequences are. And I really say to people, the mistake is to look at it from the inside. And look at your strengths from the inside and the market dynamics from the inside. You want to look at it as the customers look at you in a competitive world. You may think you're great at something, but the customers may not value that. You may think you're more valuable than an investment banker does. So outsider in perspective. Where most innovation happens, and we call it innovation. And if you say what first comes to mind for people when you say the word innovation, they think product and service innovation. So that's where most innovation happens. Where does innovating have the most impact, though? Innovating has the most impact when you start innovating in the business model. It has the most impact when you start innovating in the customer service side of the business and innovating in product. Unless you're really innovating some fundamentally new benefit platforms, innovating in the product area is not the strongest place to innovate for growth. because you're just keeping up with the competition by innovating in the product area, unless you have a new benefit platform. Keeping up with the competition does not give you more market share. And so we can think of these as a spectrum of growth drivers. If I want to drive growth, where do I want to look to drive it, and where's my competition looking to drive it? So sometimes I can get a real edge on the competition if everyone in my industry is growing product and I come out with new service models or new delivery models or new customer experiences, whether I'm selling B2B or I'm selling to consumer, I can disrupt the market, but do it still maybe in a productivity strategy rather than in a entrepreneurial strategy. So here's some of the productivity growth drivers, and you'll see how they directly tie to revenue. We want to increase market share. Great. One growth driver is customer acquisition and retention. New customers, getting them and holding them. Second is the lifetime value of a customer. Many people don't know the lifetime value of a customer. Increase the lifetime value of a customer, tremendous way to grow. Segments of your existing market that are growing at an outsized rate. So most people are focused on legacy growth. Where have I gotten my growth? Who are the customers that have been most loyal to me? And then you say, great, now where's your market going to be 3 years from now? And you find out that the dynamics of who are going to be the customers buying the big things from you in the future are not the legacy customers from the past. This is not an easy transition to make, but it's important to understand that that's a growth driver. Then strengthening your brand, improving your whole value chain execution. And I mean by value chain for me, I mean all the way from source of supply all the way through delivery to customers, the whole entire value chain. And then enabling technologies and how you use IT and how you use other kinds of technologies to be enablers of all of those other things that have line of sight. So now I want to talk about some best practices that companies use. These are proven practices to generate productivity growth. The first, this is a VC term. It's called drown some puppies, which is that you've got some favorite projects that you love and they're actually not profitable projects. They're not good business. And they're taking up a lot of resources. So one of the strategies is you got to drown some puppies to free up resources to grow. All right? You shift from thinking product and to thinking product and service platform. So a way that you can drown some puppies smartly, if you shift from thinking product improvements or product innovation to service and product platforms. And if you can't find a platform, maybe that's a puppy you should be drowning. Open innovation, that's where you're tapping the intellectual horsepower of other companies and you're buying components rather than developing components. And that's where open innovation's been most successful. It has not been successful in helping to create new products that you sell. It's been successful in helping to create new components that you incorporate into products that you sell. Sales force segmentation. There are sales reps that are hunters and there are sales reps that are farmers. If you want new business, you need hunters. If you want to grow the business you've got, you need farmers. Lots of times people ask the same sales rep to hunt and farm. Now we're looking at you from the customer's point of view in. So people talk about the sales cycle. People talk about, these are my values. This is what customers value. I don't care about what customers value. I care about what customers buy. I don't care about your sales cycle. I care about the customer's buying cycle and matching how you sell and market to how they buy. So I want to orient around the buying cycle. I want to orient not around your value attributes. I want to orient around buying attributes. And it's amazing when you line those up, the amount of discrepancy there is between what people think their value propositions are, and when then you go out and you actually start to do ethnographic and deep dive research with customers and start to understand how they buy, they don't buy based on that. And then there's customer touch points. So how you implement all of this is you implement at every place the customers touch you. And a lot of those places are now invisible because customers touch you before you even know they're touching you. 50% of customers now, especially in the B2B world, are doing research about companies before they ever contact you. And those are touch points that are invisible to you. Lead customers are a great way for productivity growth is to find lead customers. These are the customers that are the early adopters, or that are out ahead of the market, but that have a track record of the market follows them. Think of them as lead physicians in a therapeutic area. If a lead physician adopts a new medical device technology, lots of other physicians are going to go along with them. So go after the lead customers and develop things with them that they're really interested in. Community of enthusiasts. Lots of times you've got a community of customer enthusiasts that you're not tapping. How do you tap that community of enthusiasts in a way that helps you to grow? Supplier and distributor collaboration. A practice that I have is going out and talking to suppliers and distributors and saying, what is it you would recommend your customer do in order to grow more? And they always have great ideas for you. And lots of times no one's ever asked them. Forward-looking dashboards. Lots of reports are backward-looking. They're reporting history of the last month or the last quarter. They're not forward-looking and giving you the opportunity to course correct because you see what's coming. So we want to be thinking about forward-looking dashboards, not backward-looking dashboards. And finally, there's this idea of innovation challenges. This is about blowing innovation into the culture of your company by formulating a particular growth challenge, specific enough, and then structuring it as an innovation challenge, allowing people in the company to not just submit ideas. That's like Innovation 1.0, okay? No, this is actually having them submit something, work in teams, refine the idea, test it out with customers, and push innovation out into the organization. And I have found that whatever number the C-suite of a company thinks it can do with growth, if you push it out into the organization through innovation challenges, you can double the number that the C-suite thinks. Sometimes you double it because people actually have growth ideas. Sometimes you'll double it because they will now effectively execute ideas that other people have because they're now much more involved in the whole growth and innovation conversation. So that's a summary on the productivity drivers. And my claim is if you use the productivity drivers and these best practices, you should expect a 15% bump up in sales. If you're a $50 million company, you should expect that in 18 months, this is going to give you another $7.5 to $10 million in revenue. Now let's take a look at the entrepreneurial growth drivers aimed at the new revenue streams. We're going for new business models. People know what that is. Now, and if you've read the Lean Startup and Osterweiler in business models, you know business models don't just mean the financial model. They mean how the whole value chain, delivery chain, all of those kinds of things, target markets. Then we've got what are emerging or disruptive benefits that I can go after. A loss leader is going after emerging technology. Nobody going after emerging technologies making money. New delivery chains, we see that the internet is disintermediating everything these days. Having deep ethnographic customer insights, living with your customers to find problems that they have that are not your traditional problems. But you look at it and you go, that's a big problem for them. And with an entrepreneurial lens on it, you go, somebody's going to solve that problem and make money at it. Why not me? Game change execution. Because if you keep allocating resources the way you have, if you keep using the standard practices that you have from the past, and you're not implementing new practices, then you have a strategy that's disconnected from what you're actually investing resources in. So if you're going to go after things entrepreneurially and your company is not fundamentally been entrepreneurial, you're going to need a game change in how you go about executing. And so problems with entrepreneurial growth, this is not for everyone, but you've got to look at it and go, look, I'm going to deal with a set of problems. I'm going to deal with high uncertainty. I'm going to deal with the fact that I get attached to my answers and I fail to pivot or kill things early. I overinvest in things because I invest based on budget. I don't invest based on what's your next set of market proof points. Great, I'll give you $50,000. Go prove it. Doesn't prove out, I kill it. And everyone understands that. That's the way VCs allow companies to invest, and that's a smart strategy. I'm missing certain in-house capabilities, and if I'm going to go after some new markets, how am I going to supplement my in-house capabilities? Am I going to develop them in-house? Am I going to work with strategic partners? But I'm going to be missing capabilities. So these are some of the things that we need to be aware of. And then here are the best practices. First, make small bets. Don't go out and buy major plant and equipment on the hopes that this will be a big revenue stream. There's so many ways out there to get access to capital that you don't need to place big bets anymore. Go out, test it with a few customers, lead customers. If they're not interested, walk away from it. And this is a strategy that the biggest of the companies use as well. Now I have to do a much broader landscape because I'm looking not only at my direct competition, I'm looking at all sorts of other places. So I want to take an outsider-in view of the market and the technology in a much broader landscape than I would have done previously. And if you haven't read the Lean Startup book, it's a great book. I really recommend it. Or you can get on like Udacity or Coursera, and they have some fabulous Lean Startup courses that you can do in 10, 15-minute chunks. And they're really terrific. And then there's the business model canvas side of things. These are really two excellent practice areas for entrepreneurial growth. There's this whole area of being capital efficient, not investing in big plant and equipment. Leasing, borrowing. There's so much excess capacity available out there today, and there are lots of companies that are specializing in low production volumes. In an entrepreneurial mode, I want lower capital because I don't want to get locked into something that's unproven. I want to bring a disruptive lens to the market. When I'm doing talks to prompt people, I show people examples of how people have taken a disruptive view, challenge fundamental assumptions about a market, and come up with whole new solution areas that people never thought of before because they never put on that disruptive lens. Design thinking. And design thinking that starts with deep empathy. You want to do design thinking for airlines. You go out and observe airlines. And you go out and observe the outliers. You go out and observe the family with 2 kids and they're trying to get on and off the plane. Or they've got a kid who's really crying and it's, really disrupting everybody else in the area. And you start to just go out and observe things. And then you start to look at what are the problems we're solving and what might I do to start to solve them. So there's a whole methodology around design thinking. Customer co-creation. So I'm now moving from lead customer, where I'm developing something for a lead customer, to I've got customers that are actually working with me and together we're developing it. Strategic alliances to provide capabilities that I don't have. And what I call innovation sprints, different than an innovation challenge. So an innovation sprint is I want to look at this area of a problem space. And I want to give people time-based limit of like 3 months to try and find a business model that'll play out, that we should invest. So it's very, very compressed, time-based, 3 months. I may have a couple of different independent little teams working on things. I may create a contest between them, and the one that wins the contest gets a little extra funding to go forward and prove it out in some way in the marketplace. But it's very, very compressed, time-based. And we find that that time compression, that sense of immediate urgency, really helps to spur innovation in the entrepreneurial world. So now I'm going to talk about an execution model for game change here. Thinking about like an internal startup, an internal venture, an internal incubator, and the benefits that I'm looking for from doing it that way. First, if I'm looking at something entrepreneurially, I want what I call an meaning the upside is much bigger than my potential loss or much bigger than my potential investment. The second thing is I want something where I can go after it with a bounded affordable loss. I'm going to go after this area. How much would I be willing to invest, walk away from it if it doesn't turn out, without feeling excruciating pain? Affordable loss. I want a higher probability of success from whatever I'm about to do, and I want to get faster to revenue and faster to scale. That's the benefits that I'm looking for from this kind of execution model. What I need to be willing to ante in order to get that is, one, I need to be able to be hands-on the champion. I need to be able to proactively help this group remove roadblocks, introduce them to people outside the company, provide access to certain kinds of internal resources or external resources that a team may need. Hands-on executive champion. I need to allocate some money. I need to allocate resources. I just can't expect people and throw them in and say, do it on your own time. And I need to have people play by a new set of rules, these entrepreneurial rules, rather than the more incremental rules. Two different games. So now I'm going to look at what are my in-house capabilities, and I'm going to leverage those. I'm going to look at what my entrepreneurial environment is internally, and I have to fix it if it's not entrepreneurial. And so here are the key things that I have to do. And what I mean by the term starter, that third bullet on there, is some people in your organization are fabulous at starting things. They're not great at running things. Some people in your organization are great at running things, and they're miserable at starting things. If you want to be doing entrepreneurial things, you need to have people that are starters. Then we have to look at, if I'm going after growth drivers, what extended capabilities do I need to have? And what's the easiest way and the cheapest way and the most agile way of incorporating them? And the most expensive way is to hire it. That's the opposite of capital efficiency. We now have talent efficiency, and you need experts on demand. All startups have mentors, for example. You have access to thought leaders that are academic thought leaders or retired executives that are thought leaders. And then you're looking at financing. So even though a lot of you, if not most of you, are privately owned, they're still available to you. Other than debt financing, there's still alternative ways of financing it and syndicating some of the risk. That's one of the reasons that I've merged with Headwaters, is because there's a whole line that they have for helping companies to finance now internal growth ventures that they have. And so what we're looking for at the end of the day in the entrepreneurial world is we're looking for a much higher probability of that asymmetric upside. And we want to measure it in the early stages, not by revenue, but we want to measure it by customer problems we're solving and the scalability of those in the marketplace. So in summary, we've got two growth strategies. One's aimed at outcompeting, one's aimed at new revenue streams, and we've got 4 major steps that we do to transform ideas into money.